Tell me about a time you handled an urgent request. Introduction. This is a common behavioral interview question for software developers, backend developers, full-stack developers, senior developers, and team leads. Interviewers ask this question to understand how you react under pressure, whether you can prioritize urgent work, how you separate urgent from important, how you communicate quickly and clearly, how you avoid rushing unsafe changes, how you coordinate with QA, product owners, DevOps, and support teams, how you deliver quickly while protecting quality. This question is especially important for check Java developers, backend developers, Spring Boot developers, full-stack developers, senior software developers, team leads, Agile teams, production support teams. The best way to answer this question is by using the STAR method. STAR means S. Situation. Explain the background. T. Task. Explain your responsibility. A. Action. Explain what you personally did. R. Result. Explain the final outcome. A good interview answer usually spends 10% situation, 10% task, 60% action, 20% result. The most important part is the action section because interviewers want to understand how you handled urgency without creating more risk. Question. Tell me about a time you handled an urgent request. Example 1. Handling an urgent production API issue situation. In one project, support reported that some users were getting errors while updating their customer profile. The issue happened after a recent Spring Boot API change. It did not affect every user, but it affected users whose request was missing one optional field. Task. I needed to investigate the issue urgently, identify the root cause, fix it safely, and support QA validation. Action. I first joined the production support discussion and gathered the key details. I checked affected endpoint, error message, request payload pattern, correlation IDs, logs, deployment version, affected user count, recent code changes. I reproduced the issue in a lower environment using a similar request payload. I found that the service logic assumed an optional field would always be present. Instead of rushing a quick patch without testing, I created a focused fix. The fix included null safe handling, validation update, regression test for missing optional field, test for optional field present, test for valid request, test for invalid request. I communicated progress regularly to support QA and the product owner. After QA validated the fix, I supported the deployment and monitored production logs. Result. The issue was fixed quickly. Affected users were able to update their profiles successfully. The regression tests helped prevent the same issue from returning. Why this answer works. This answer is strong because it shows calm handling of urgency, production ownership, root cause analysis, safe fix, QA coordination, monitoring after release. Example 2. Handling an urgent report correction request situation. In one application, business users reported that a daily report showed incorrect totals for a specific date range. The report was used for operational decisions, so the product owner requested an urgent investigation. Task. I needed to quickly determine whether the report was wrong, identify the cause, and provide a fix or explanation. Action. I first confirmed the expected and actual report values with the business team. Then I reviewed key affected date range, key report query, key backend calculation logic, key database records, key time zone conversion, key canceled records, key records near midnight, key recent changes. I found that records near midnight were being grouped by UTC date, while the business expected the local business time zone. I explained the issue in simple business terms. The system was grouping some records under a different date boundary than the business expected. Then I fixed the date calculation logic. I added tests for C records near midnight, inclusive end date, month-end records, daylight saving time scenario, empty result, normal daytime records. I worked with QA and business users to validate sample reports before release. Result. The report totals were corrected. Business users confirmed the output matched their expected results. The team also updated reporting requirements to explicitly include time zone rules. Why this answer works. This answer is good because it shows: urgent business support, data investigation, time zone awareness, clear business communication, regression testing, requirement improvement. Example 3. Handling an urgent security-related request situation. In one sprint, the product owner raised an urgent concern that a user role might have access to an admin-only action. The feature was close to release, so the team needed quick confirmation. Task: I needed to verify the access control rules urgently and make any necessary backend changes before release. Action: I reviewed the role-based access requirements and compared them with the implementation. I checked Spring security configuration, service layer permission checks, front-end visibility rules, API endpoint access, admin role behavior, normal user behavior, audit logging requirement. I found that the front-end hid the admin action correctly, but the backend still needed a stronger service layer permission check. I communicated the finding clearly. I explained that UI hiding was useful, but backend authorization was still required to protect the API. Then I added backend role validation, service layer permission check, forbidden response for unauthorized roles, audit logging for admin action, tests for admin access, tests for blocked normal user access, tests for missing or invalid token. I worked with QA to validate both UI and API access. Result: the feature was released with stronger authorization controls. The urgent concern was resolved before production. The team also added role permission checks to future refinement discussions. Why this answer works. This answer is strong because it shows urgent security awareness, backend authorization knowledge, clear risk communication, QA collaboration, release safety, prevention mindset. Example 4. Handling an urgent downstream integration request situation. In one project, our service needed to integrate with a downstream API owned by another internal team. Near the end of the sprint, the downstream team changed one response field name in the QA environment. This broke our integration testing. Task: I needed to handle the urgent integration issue quickly so QA could continue testing. Action: I first confirmed the actual response from the downstream API. Then I compared it with the agreed contract. I checked I response field name, I data type, I required or optional behavior, API version, I backward compatibility, I error response format, I QA environment deployment version. I contacted the downstream team and confirmed whether the change was intentional. They confirmed it was a contract change that had not been communicated early. To reduce impact, I updated our client mapping to support the new field while keeping backward compatibility where possible. I also updated integration test data, response DTO mapping, error handling, API contract documentation, QA test notes. I communicated the change to QA and the product owner, so they understood the impact. Result: QA testing resumed the same day. The integration was completed without delaying the release significantly. The teams also agreed to communicate contract changes earlier in future integrations. Why this answer works. This answer is good because it shows check, urgent integration handling, cross-team coordination, API contract awareness, backward compatibility, QA support, process improvement. Example 5. Handling an urgent performance issue situation. After releasing a customer search feature, monitoring showed that the API response time increased during peak usage. The feature worked functionally, but broad searches were slower than expected. Task: I needed to investigate the performance issue urgently and reduce production risk. Action: I first reviewed monitoring dashboards and logs. I checked response time trend, slow endpoints, database query time, request parameters, page size, sorting field, data volume, index usage, timeout errors. I found that broad searches with large page sizes caused heavy database queries. I proposed quick but safe improvements. The changes included CUC, maximum page size, default page size, database index for common filter, validation for unsupported sorting, optimized query, monitoring after deployment. I communicated to the product owner that the feature did not need to be removed, but it needed safeguards to protect performance. I worked with QA to confirm that the functional behavior stayed the same. Result: API response time improved. Timeout risk was reduced. The team learned to include performance checks earlier for large search features. Why this answer works? This answer is strong because it shows urgent performance troubleshooting, monitoring usage, database optimization, safe mitigation, stakeholder communication, production readiness. Example 6. Handling an urgent QA blocker situation. During a sprint, QA was blocked while testing a new backend feature. They could not proceed because the test data needed for one scenario was missing and the deadline was close. Task: I needed to help unblock QA quickly without compromising the quality of testing. Action: I first reviewed the blocked scenario with QA. I clarified what test case was blocked, what data was missing, which API behavior needed validation, whether existing test data could be reused, whether new data needed to be created, whether the issue affected only QA or the application logic. I created the required test data in the lower environment and documented how it was prepared. I also added examples for happy path, invalid input, role-based access, empty result, error response. Then I updated the story with QA notes so the same test setup could be reused later. I stayed available while QA retested the feature. Result: QA was unblocked quickly. Testing continued without waiting for another team. The story was completed on time, and the test data notes helped future regression testing. Why this answer works? This answer is good because it shows urgent QA support, practical problem solving, test data preparation, documentation, collaboration, delivery support. Example 7. Handling an urgent deployment configuration issue situation. During a release, a feature failed smoke testing in the QA environment. The code had deployed successfully, but the feature could not connect to an external service. Task: I needed to identify the problem urgently so the release could continue. Action: I checked application logs and compared environment configuration. I found that a required environment variable for the external service URL was missing in QA. I communicated the issue clearly to DevOps, QA, and the release manager. I explained. Yes, code deployment was successful. The failure was configuration related. Which environment variable was missing? What needed to be updated? What smoke test should be rerun? What documentation needed updating? I worked with DevOps to add the configuration. After the change, I reran the smoke test and confirmed the API worked. I also updated the deployment checklist to include that configuration. Result: the release continued after the configuration was fixed. QA could complete smoke testing. The checklist update prevented the same issue in later environments. Why this answer works? This answer is strong because it shows urgent release support, environment troubleshooting, DevOps collaboration, clear communication, checklist improvement, production readiness. Example 8. Handling an urgent data fix request situation. In one production support case, a small set of records had an incorrect status because of a failed batch job. Business users needed the records corrected quickly so downstream reports would be accurate. Task: I needed to support the urgent data fix safely and make sure we did not create additional data issues. Action: I first asked for details about the affected records and business impact. Then I verified the records using read-only queries. I checked affected record count, current status, expected status, source of the incorrect value, batch job logs, Downstream impact. Audit requirements. Approval needed for correction. I did not directly update data without approval. I prepared a controlled fix plan that included: check, list of affected records, validation query before update, update script reviewed by another developer, backup or rollback plan, validation query after update, business sign-off, audit note. After approval, the correction was applied in a controlled way. I helped validate the records and confirmed downstream reports were corrected. Result: the urgent data issue was resolved safely. Business users received corrected reporting data. The team also improved batch job monitoring to catch similar failures earlier. Why this answer works? This answer is good because it shows, urgent data support, careful validation, approval awareness, audit thinking, safe correction process, business impact awareness. Best short answer version. If you need a short interview answer, you can say, in one project, support reported an urgent production issue where some users were getting errors while updating their profile through a Spring Boot API. I joined the production support discussion and quickly gathered the affected endpoint, error message, request payload pattern, correlation IDs, logs, deployment version, and recent code changes. I reproduced the issue in a lower environment and found that the service logic assumed one optional field would always be present. I fixed the issue by adding null safe handling and regression tests for optional field present, optional field missing, valid request, and invalid request. I communicated progress to support, QA, and the product owner, then supported QA validation and monitored production logs after deployment. As a result, the issue was fixed quickly. Affected users could update their profiles, and the regression tests helped prevent the same issue from returning. Common mistakes to avoid. 1. Acting fast without understanding the problem. Bad answer. I quickly changed the code and deployed it. Better answer. I first gathered facts, reproduced the issue, identified the root cause, then made a focused fix. 2. Ignoring communication. Bad answer. I handled it by myself. Better answer. I kept QA, support, DevOps, and the product owner updated with clear status and next steps. 3. Skipping testing because it was urgent. Bad answer. It was urgent, so we skipped testing. Better answer. Because it was urgent, I kept testing focused, but still covered the affected scenario and regression risk. 4. Treating every request as equal. Bad answer. I stopped everything for every urgent request. Better answer. I assessed user impact, business priority, and risk before deciding how to respond. 5. No prevention. Bad answer. The urgent request was completed. Better answer. I added regression tests, documentation, monitoring, or a checklist improvement to prevent the same issue. Best practices for answering this question. Use the STAR method. Explain why the request was urgent. Describe how you triaged it. Gather facts before acting. Communicate with the right people. Prioritize user or business impact. Make a focused fix. Keep testing safe and practical. Provide status updates. End with prevention or learning. What interviewers are looking for. Interviewers want to see whether you can stay calm under pressure, prioritize effectively, handle urgent issues without panic, communicate clearly, make safe technical decisions, coordinate with others, protect production quality, deliver quickly without cutting critical corners. For senior roles, they also want to see incident judgment, stakeholder management, risk assessment, release support maturity, production ownership, decision-making under pressure, prevention mindset. Strong words to use in your answer. You can use words like triaged, prioritized, investigated, reproduced, coordinated, communicated, mitigated, validated, monitored, resolved, unblocked, reduced impact, prevented recurrence, followed up. Example: I handled the urgent request by triaging the impact, gathering facts, reproducing the issue, making a focused fix, coordinating QA validation, communicating progress, and monitoring production after release. Good urgent request topics you can use. Depending on your experience, you can talk about. Check. Production API failure. Urgent report correction. Urgent security access review. Downstream integration blocker. Performance issue after release. QA testing blocker. Deployment configuration issue. Urgent data fix request. Failed batch job. Missing environment variable. Urgent client-facing bug. Urgent monitoring alert. Release smoke test failure. Urgent role permission issue. Urgent rollback or hotfix support. Final summary. Tell me about a time you handled an urgent request is an important interview question because software teams often face production issues, release blockers, QA blockers, and urgent business needs. The best answer should include what the urgent request was, why it was urgent, how you triaged it, who you communicated with, what facts you gathered, what action you took, how you validated the result, what impact was reduced, what you changed afterward. Good examples include production API failure, urgent report correction, urgent security access review, urgent downstream integration blocker, performance issue, QA blocker, deployment configuration issue, urgent data fix. The strongest answers show calmness, prioritization, communication, technical problem solving, safe execution, and ownership under pressure.